But would meet 11 times a week for 52 weeks of the year. That's a whopping 572 services. Sunday would comprise 4 meetings, getting up at 6:30 for the first one in this windowless assembly hall, bounded by a high wall and a large security fence with gates. It was always manned when a service was on. It felt more like a 45 bank than a secret house of prayer, with a main central area where the preacher would speak. It was a 200-seater with a car park big enough to accommodate. The seats in the front row would offer the person sat there use of a handheld microphone. These microphones were like walkie-talkies. People could speak into them during the service, and they would ask questions such as a revelation from the day, or about something the preacher said, or share thoughts about the Bible readings they'd had. You had to be a certain type of somebody to be sat in the front row, sufficiently superior enough to speak into these microphones. Every female, they all had to sit at the back, out of sight. There was never any music, and hymns were always sung a cappella. They were never pre-arranged. One male would often start, and then everybody would join in. All the men on a Sunday, they had to wear a white shirt and black dress pants. It looked like a waiters' conference. The service would go on for about an hour. Then the adults would chat while the kids met up in the car park. It was painstakingly obvious. The older I got, the worse I became. I simply did not grow out of what my parents expected I would. They desperately hoped my irrational behaviour was due to my youth, and that I would eventually grow up. They soon realised I had absolutely no filters and was way too impulsive, often inappropriate. In my mind, I enjoyed the monotony of life growing up in the cult, by always looking on the bright side of life, or particularly the more humorous side. Anything that made me laugh helped the time go by, which unfortunately brought out the worst in me. Let me introduce you to Wesley Bendit. He was a rotund man who wore his trousers so high up his torso that I would shout.
What waist is your chest?
You didn't get it. But I'd arranged a song that I would often try and sing to Mr. Bendit, much to my dad's embarrassment, and usually through my dad's fingers, as he would try and muffle my efforts. I mean, it was times like this that Dad was thankful I had a speech impediment, because the song I was singing was about him, Mr. Bendit, not being fit to wipe my backside. And it went a little bit like this.
Wesley Bendit, you're not fit to wipe my butt.
Let me introduce you to Moses, Mo for short, aka Molasses Mo. He was a bachelor in his 40s who still lived at home with his parents. He never took a wife. More accurately, one never took him. The reason why he was a bachelor is he had an iron deficiency, and nothing worked apart from his backside. Often he would light up that missing room toilet like the incinerator at Sellafield. It was nuclear. Napalm Mo was another name I remember. He was always on a strict diet of homebrew molasses, which was the only thing that would loosen his stools and relieve Mo's blockage. But it would also release a vapour like no other, a bit like the Bisto advert from the 80s.
Ah, Bisto!
But this didn't smell like gravy. But one time, I couldn't wait to tell my dad, because we'd laugh about it at home when he was less serious. If you remember, I had no filters, and my dad was in the middle of having a serious talk with these two exclusive brothers, when I excitedly declared mid-conversation,
Dad, Mo's having a shit time.
As you can imagine, when I got home, I got met with Mr. Stipbrush again. On Sundays, in between services, each family would have to entertain or be entertained. This was called the allocation, and it was set up by way of a notification pushed through the door midweek, confirming the family you were going to or the several families you were entertaining. This was quite a bill, waiting for that little slip of paper to land on your doormat. The intensity of unwrapping this note from its envelope, while hoping it wasn't that one family you couldn't stand. Enter the Gormos. This was not their second name, and it wasn't a spin-off of the Bruce Lee film Enter the Dragon. By the way, what a stupid name to call a dragon. They were all slow blinking, mouth breathing, utterly gormless, hence the name Gormo. Mr. Gormo, the dad, he was super stingy. He was tighter than 2 coats of paint. He would dilute the coat like cordial. And if one of the kids needed a poo, they could only go once they'd received their ration of a sheet of toilet paper. Those in his allocation would leave with their stomachs touching their backs and mouths drier than a Pharisee's flip-flop. The only cult magazine usually available for general consumption in the cult was the National Geographic, which was on show in Gormo's house. But this one was about the tribes of the jungle, where all the women were photographed topless. In this special edition, I will add that all the breasts of the women had been neatly cut out, keeping the rest of the torso intact. The last thing he wanted to do was discuss with me, but that didn't stop me asking him anyway.
Where all the business?
I was a nuisance. When dinner was finished, most allocations, they would drink a lot of whiskey, copious amounts of this stuff, apart from that Gormos. But now they were all a little bit drunk, my dad would often put on a show. He had developed his own infamous party extravaganza that gained him great recognition, and it included made-up characters such as the Laughing Clown. He would sit on a chair, surrounded by visiting cult families, with a handkerchief across his knee, and pretend to laugh, and he'd start off with like a small laugh, to the point where he's rapturously laughing, and so is everybody else. He also did a Dracula act, where it was simply ridiculous, because he would lie prostrate on the floor, as though he was in a coffin, and slowly rise to his feet with his arms crossed over his chest, and his teeth hanging over the bottom of his lip to look like fangs. It was ridiculously funny. Have you ever tried to get up off the floor without using your arms or hands? But everybody loved it. Incredibly, he kept a secret book of all the Beatles songs, and he would sing songs such as Yesterday and Paperback Writer. His private audience would marvel at what they thought were his incredible songwriting abilities, because for some, if not most, this would have been the first time they've ever heard these lyrics. The Beatles and their music was strictly prohibited. Dad would not admit how he knew the words of what some would describe
evil, worldly songs.
He was once challenged by a more senior brother who went on to become his nemesis. We'll get to that later. But he'd recognised the song from the world, to which Dad replied,
It's something I overheard in the supermarket.
"Oh, soft with ape." Let me introduce you to Chaz. Chaz was the brother of Molasses Mo. Despite Chaz really liking a drink and being somewhat unhinged and very impulsive, he was great fun to be around. In 1981, Liverpool beat Real Madrid 1-0, bringing home the European Cup. Fortunately, we didn't have to travel too far to witness this victory parade, because we lived on the main road. However, We had to be mindful that 3 doors up was Flops, but we still intended to watch the return of these triumphant champions, ideally without being seen and a little bit set back. So if he did look out of his window, he couldn't see it, or us. But Chaz, he was bevy. And all of a sudden, as the bus with the trophy and the team was coming, Chaz, having had his fill of whiskey, disappeared, and a second later emerged with this parasol from our garden furniture, which was red, spinning it in the air while hollering his Glenfiddich fuel chants as the team passed. He ended up in the middle of the dual carriageway because he tripped, nearly under the bus, and at that moment, when that open top bus passed, the whole of the Liverpool team knew who he was. Fortunately, Flobs must have been in purposeful lockdown, because this blatant, loud, accidental act went unseen. Had he glanced out of his window at that moment, Chaz making his Mary Poppins impression, it would have been serious. Chaz would have been subject to being shut up, and possibly for some time. We of course didn't go on holidays. It was strictly prohibited. You had to be at every meeting daily. Although on occasion you would be forgiven for missing the odd one. And on this occasion we decided to have a couple of days out, hoping we could get away with missing the odd one. Chaz had hired a canal boat because partway through the day we'd learned that a special meeting had been called, as some members were being called to be shut up, at least for 7 days. This was during the royal wedding of Princess Diana and Prince Charles in 1981. Assaulted several people who had watched the wedding on public televisions or in a neighbour's house. One had actually confessed to watching it through the shop of a chippy. I mean, some of these sinners were so guilt-ridden that they just openly confessed to the leaders. So a special confession firing squad was formed to shut up corporately and publicly these individuals and allow any further confessions. So everybody had to be at that meeting. On occasions like this, it would be like a full house. I mean, this was entertainment at its best, as long as you were not on the end of shutting up. So our day out on the canal was cut short. I remember racing from where we were to where we needed to be at breakneck speed. Unbeknownst to Dad, I had watched the royal wedding in our neighbour's house, albeit briefly. As a kid, panic set in, or a manner of things crossed my mind. Had they found out about me? Should I tell me Dad? Will I be made to leave my family? I mean, despite this fear-driven imaginary fears that playing out of my mind, I was certainly not about to come clean. Nor was Chaz, who had also quietly confessed in my dad's ear that he had watched it in a local pub. That settled my mind straight away, somewhat. But not as much as the relief I felt when that firing squad of a meeting was over and I had gotten away with it. The bizarre circumstances that one was subjected to back in those days. Living within the confines of this cult, trying desperately to risk everything just for a sense of what it's like to live in the world, but not too dangerously that we would get caught, because the outcome could be absolutely devastating, particularly if they separated from you from your family.